Let's bring the discussion to our studios now and continue on our reflections. We'll look now at the role that civil society can play in ensuring free and fair elections come the 29th of May. Defend Our Democracy's civil society movement is urging NGOs and other civil society groups to join the Election Watch campaign, which aims to monitor the upcoming polls. The registration for the IEC election observers is closing on the 1st of May. That's next Wednesday, if memory serves. To speak more about this, let's bring in Zaakirah Vadi, who's the Executive Director of Defend Our Democracy, joining us in our studios here in Auckland Park. Zaakirah, lovely to see you. Thanks very much indeed for your time and patience. You and I were sitting together as we're taking in some of the sentiments of those South Africans, really, who are reflecting in their own ways about how far we've come. And before we speak about the observers' roles, I wonder, just generally speaking, what Defend Our Democracy's take of our democracy is, given just how different it lands for people in the country.
Well, all of the views that were expressed thus far are absolutely valid. 30 years into democracy, we're sitting on a 32% unemployment rate at the moment. And a recent study has indicated that 67% of South Africans would prefer some sort of an autocracy, a reduction in rights, if they are given proper service delivery.
Wow.
And I think that that's reflected on the streets. We've seen the sentiments of young people, especially on the streets today. But at the same time, I think we do need to value the political gains that we've made. So we do have the right to vote. We do have the right to express ourselves. We have the right to sit in a studio in a way, different races, different religions, and share our experiences in a way that we would not have been able to do before. So there are benefits to democracy, but I think in the way that democracy may have been implemented, or the lack of implementation of policies over the last couple of years especially, is really what I think is taking us backward in some instances.
Yeah, and the promise of democracy is that the will of the people will prevail, and hopefully a whole lot more people will be happier with that. But that's certainly not the case in what we're seeing in our country. And I suppose as part of the reason is part of what you've just mentioned, the fact that what is promised, even in the Constitution, is yet to materialize for millions of people who participate in this democracy.
Certainly. I think we mistake democracy to be just putting a mark on a ballot. But that's not where it should stop. There has to be greater citizen accountability over public representatives. We've seen a bit of it over the years, and we've seen it in different forms, be it a kind of service delivery protest that takes place, or someone going to Parliament to monitor what bills are being discussed, for instance. But I think that we do need newer models for accountability, and especially as we potentially go into coalition governance at the provincial and national level, it's certainly something that broader civil society would need to explore.
Right. And part of that role that civil society can play, of course, is around being an observer, right? Which is, I suppose, in the main what we were hoping to speak about. Election Watch campaign. What does that entail?
Well, we've had 30 years of free and fair elections in this country, and we want to ensure that it stays this way. It doesn't really matter that we're going to have a more fiercely contested election. We feel that the processes, the systems, as well as the responses of political parties must be mature enough and must be developed enough to handle whatever comes this year in 2024. So our campaign is calling for the ordinary public, as long as you are a South African registered voter, you are able to register to become an observer. You can go to a voting station that's near you, spend some time, watch what's unfolding, share your feedback with us. And as many people as we can get into voting stations across the country, that feedback becomes a valuable tool to ensure greater transparency and integrity of the elections.
I can imagine, of course, because of just how high the stakes are this year, there's going to be concerns around who the observers are themselves, right? You'd want people who aren't even at the level of perception seen to be batting for either side of this multifaceted political landscape, for lack of a better term. How are you going to be ensuring that people play ball fairly?
Well, our system is quite good in that it allows for political party observers as well.
Right.
So anyone who is politically inclined and would like to observe on behalf of their parties, that's perfectly okay. We are calling for people involved in civil society, ordinary people from the country, to be able to go out and do so. You may be associated with a political party, but you may no longer be a member. You are still welcome to be an election observer as well. So we're not able to, I think, go into the intricacies of people's lives, who they were previously.
Right.
But certainly the IEC has quite a rigorous process where they vet the different organizations coming through, and there's an ethical code of conduct for each observer that they need to undertake and keep to, very much like you have an electoral code of conduct for political parties.
Right. If memory serves, the IEC, I think, spoke about 23,000 polling stations. I'm not sure if that number is accurate, if your memory is anything to go by, but I'm just trying to juxtapose that to how many observers then typically you'd need, given just how many voting stations there are going to be.
Well, we kicked off this campaign last year, so we're not going to have 23,000 voting stations covered.
Right.
But our intention is for 2026 and 2029. It's certainly where we want to go. For this election, we have just under 1,000 people registered under Election Watch. And during this last period leading to May 1st, we hope others would be able to join in. But at the same time, we're working with other organizations who have similar numbers. And we think that we should, through our various initiatives, be at least able to cover 10% of voting stations in the country. And we think that that is a sufficient enough representative sample in order to pronounce on the overall or broad integrity of the elections.
Yeah, and the obvious question, of course, is which ones do you take and which ones do you leave out?
Well, we want people to observe at the closest voting station to them. So there's no transport issues in terms of getting there. It's most likely going to be the voting station where you'll be casting your ballot. So you're really invested in that process from the start. So that's our call to people. Wherever you are, go to that voting station to become an observer. At the same time, we are looking at a strategy where there may be hotspot areas, incidences of violence maybe at previous elections that had taken place. And those are where we may want to put in specific teams of volunteers or observers to be there and observe what unfolds. So that strategy is being developed, and hopefully closer to the time we'd be able to indicate where our observers are stationed.
Fair enough. You speak about violence, and I'm sure you're also watching or listening in very closely to the rhetoric of this election so far. Look, mudslinging is part and parcel of what people call silly season, right? We know that politicians are unlikely to exchange compliments during this time, but there is a line to be drawn, I'm sure. And I wonder, given how things have fared so far, how worried you are about, what's being said generally in politics at the moment, and the extent to which it may feed into what could sometimes turn into a very violent state of affairs.
We are, I think, less concerned about the exchanges between political parties. What we are concerned about is where political parties have been critical of the IEC in a way that's unwarranted. So anyone can be critical of the IEC, that's fair. But at the same time, when there are unwarranted accusations made about the credibility of the IEC, of particular commissioners, or the way in which elections have been previously run, you begin to cast aspersions or doubt about the electoral process before it even has started. And that's worrying. If someone wants to vote on election day, at the back of their mind then would be this narrative, but if it's not free and fair from the start, what does it even matter that I go out? So political parties have to be absolutely cautious to avoid that kind of scenario. And at the same time, we are quite aware of the global examples. If you look at what took place in the US and in Brazil, where you have a populist leader in the form of Trump or Bolsonaro, who post-elections then discredit those election results, and their supporters go out and cause chaos. And we are quite concerned about a similar scenario here. And we would urge all political parties to ensure that that sort of scenario does not take place. Especially, this is our 30th year of freedom, it's the 30th year of democracy, and we want to ensure that the standard of our elections remains the same, if not, it improves.
Absolutely. Plenty at stake. We've never had as many people register to vote, in the same way we've never had as many political parties canvassing for those votes. Zaakirah Vadi, thanks for popping by. We appreciate your time on the SABC. Very important discussion about what is at stake as we march on to the 29th of May. Zaakirah Vadi, of course, is the Executive Director with Defend Our Democracy, a clarion call really for people who are willing, able to be observers, to put their hands up and contribute to what ultimately could make this a successful democracy.